My winter project this year is something I've always wanted but could never afford, an outdoor wood-burning sauna. Now, these typically cost between $5,000 and $50,000. My goal is to build this 4-person outside wood-burning sauna for less than $1,000. And I recognize that's still a lot of money. I'm also going to show you in this video places that I spent money where I could have done it for free. And then at the very end, I'm going to do a breakdown in actual dollars spent so far. And it might surprise you what the most expensive item or items has been. So be sure to watch until the end. The process of building my geothermal greenhouse using mostly recycled materials really opened my eyes to the potential of repurposed, upcycled, and recycled materials. By far, my most favorite free material to use is pallets. Now, are you a little unsure about whether or not it's safe to use pallets in a project like this? Well, be sure to check out the separate video that I made specifically about that. Okay, well, let's get into the sauna. Keep your clothes on. The first thing I did was decide the overall dimensions of the sauna by laying it out on its back. Doing this helped me to determine the orientation of the pallets. Would they run narrow side out or deep side out? It also helped me to decide to shorten the middle pallets by about 6 inches. This brought the already small ceiling area much lower. A central fact about saunas is that the heat moves up to the ceiling. So moving the ceiling down and making the ceiling small would force the heat down lower into the sauna where it needs to be, where the people are. At this point, I needed to decide on the type and size of heat source for the sauna. Now, I already knew that I really wanted it to be a wood stove, but the problem with that is, the bigger the stove, the further you have to sit from it, and the further it needs to be from the walls. You see the problem? This is a very small sauna, and so, how is that going to work? Well, this caused me to look for smaller and smaller wood stoves until I stumbled upon a type of wood-burning stove called a hot tent stove. I reached out to one of the companies that makes these, a company by the name of Solo Wilder, and they generously sent me one of these stoves to use in my sauna. But then I needed to figure out placement. Where would I put it? I bounced ideas back and forth with my architect buddy Josh as to what the placement of the stove would be. And then Josh came up with the idea for, what were you saying, Josh?
Yeah, I was thinking, what if we put it in a bump out so that we can maximize the floor space inside?
Ah, yeah, good idea. And so it was decided that the stove would sit in a small, extended area behind the structure. I had some spare pieces of composite decking that I used to make 8 feet for the structure to sit on, 4 for the main structure and 4 for the bump out. This meant that there wasn't any wood sitting directly on the ground. I had some leftover 2x8 boards that I had used to create the 45-degree corners for the 4 angled pallets. I ripped the 2x8s into parallelograms that fit into the ends of those pallets. This made those 4 corner pallets into trapezoids. I framed out a central box, and this is where I spent some money on 2x4s for that central structure. Quite often I find pallets that are made of dimensional 2x4s, but the one catch is they're only about 60 inches long, and for the central structure I needed them to be quite a bit longer. So this was an area where I decided to spend the money versus improvising sort of like a sistered together central structure. And I could have done it, but I decided to spend the money. So up until this point, I've spent money on 2x4s, 1 extra 2x8 because I didn't have enough to make the corners, and fasteners, nails and screws. Assembly went pretty fast. I used some wood clamps and some boards as kickstands. Snapping the pallet panels into place was pretty satisfying since the corner pallets fit into the structure so nicely. Once the central structure was in place, this was another area where I decided to spend money instead of doing it for free. You see, I knew I was going to be cladding the exterior in pallet wood shingles, but you know, this is what the exterior would have looked like, and so I needed to fill in all of those strips. Very easily done by ripping another pallet apart and then filling in all those gaps. But for the sake of time, I decided to use enough sheets of OSB to just cover the whole exterior. And the main reason that I chose OSB was, for my area, it was the cheapest plywood I could find. Once the outside was covered in OSB, the next step was wrapping the exterior in moisture barrier. And that gets me to where I'm at now, which is covering the whole exterior in pallet wood shingles. Be sure to check out the videos that I've made separately about how to make the shingles and how to install them. Oh, and I'm also finishing the shingles in boiled linseed oil. Okay, so that's where I'm at so far, and I thought I would bring you up to speed on the list of things that I'm currently working on or thinking about. Insulation. I haven't completely decided both what type and how I'm going to do the installation of the insulation. Installation. Interior wall covering. So right now the front runner idea is cedar fence boards. Now obviously they're rough. I would need to run them through the planer, but I can get them for about maybe $3 to $4 a board versus $3 to $4 per lineal foot for cedar in general that you would use for installing in saunas. So that's kind of the direction that I'm going. And then I would also probably run them through the router to cut out tongue and groove for them, because that would make it nicer for the installation. Fire protection. My plan for the stove is to build basically a 5-sided box from large concrete pavers that you would get from a big box home improvement store. And that would kind of be a multifaceted thing in that it would protect the wood of the sauna, and it would also kind of act like a thermal sink. So that's something I'm thinking about. Wood storage. I'm planning on having some wood storage in the bump out area, kind of like on either side of the stove, outside of that area that I was just describing for the fire protection. And adjustable air vents. These are super critical to as far as where they're placed and how big they are and all that sort of thing for a sauna to run correctly. So that's something that's on my list that I'm working on. And a solar powered light. I've been looking around. I think I found a pretty good one. And by the way, all of the things that I have purchased so far and that I'm thinking about purchasing, there's links in the description so that you can go and take a look at them for yourself. Okay, so I had mentioned at the outset I would tell you how much I have spent so far. So here is a breakdown. Fasteners, screws and nails, $190. I bought 18 2x4s, and that came out to $60. I bought one additional 2x8 that I had mentioned, and that was $10. I bought 7 sheets of OSB, and so that was one of the big optional spends. That cost $100. This particular moisture barrier is basically house wrap. I didn't want to buy an entire giant roll of house wrap for this tiny little structure, and I was able to find on Amazon a smaller amount for about half the cost. Now, I've already purchased an interior moisture barrier designed specifically for saunas. It has kind of interesting properties that reflect moisture and heat back out, and so that's kind of cool. It was a little pricey at $90. So that brings the subtotal to $500, but I need to also factor in the Solo Wilder stove, and that was $150, but that was a gift, as I mentioned. So that gets the theoretical amount spent so far to $650. Now, I'm pretty sure the cedar boards, even though they're, relatively cheap, it's gonna cost me about $300 to $350 to buy those cedar boards. So the budget is getting tight if I want to stay under $1,000. It's going to be close. Well, I would love to get your input, especially on the things that are currently kind of in the mix on what I'm working on. Please hit the bell icon, check out my shop, do all that YouTube stuff. It really does make a difference. And stay tuned for more updates on the Pallet wood sauna.